course, right when I start recording, I feel like I've got something in my eye. I also apparently am in low battery, so everything's going wrong right now, but we're just gonna do it anyway. If you think about it, when we're picking up these books, how often do we actually look into who the author is, learning aspects about their life, their experiences, how they grew up, and how that influenced their writing? It was kind of a two-edged sword. That's not the right term to use. It doesn't matter. We're gonna move on. Just that one element really kind of pissed me off, if we're gonna be honest. Like and subscribe. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Leandra the TBR0, and my goal is to slowly but surely lessen my physical TBR one book at a time, and hopefully I am encouraging you to do the same if that's your goal. I am going to be talking about my February reads. This is my wrap-up video. It is the first week of March, so hopefully all of these reads are really fresh in my mind. I definitely had a good reading month. I read 7 books. I'm pretty happy with it, especially with the result, even though there are a few that are definitely not anywhere near my favorites, and I have quite strong feelings about them, so I'm really interested to see what you all think. And if you've read these books, please add in your own thoughts in the conversations and comment below, because I would love to know if I'm alone in these feelings or if some of you agreed with me. So before we get into it though, I do want to talk about what I'm currently reading, and that is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. She is a well-known author in various aspects. I think for me, she's better known for her Arusha middle grade fantasy series. It's won, I think, certain awards, and it's been on a lot of major best fantasy lists. She's published others as well. I can't remember if it's been YA or adult fantasy, but this one is definitely adult fantasy. It's dark fantasy as well. It's got a lot of myths and legends and folklore, like from various areas of the world, infused into this book. One of the main characters is a professor of like legends and folklore, so his perspectives, his own experiences definitely flow into it. His own knowledge of history has been really fascinating. More so it's interesting because I think it's set in like the 80s or 90s, which is kind of weird, but it's never fully stated. You can just tell based on the technology that's being mentioned, the clunky cell phones that have the wires coming out of it, not a wire, what is it, antenna. The antenna's coming out of it, which I recall my first cell phone had an antenna, and I remember wondering how effective opening that antenna actually was. So that's why I'm thinking it's probably the 90s, just because it seems really new and they're super clunky and huge. But anyway, so what I find especially fascinating is that like the 3 main characters, Indigo, the bridegroom, who's never named, and Azure, whose name is one of the hues of blue that I just can't pronounce, so I'm sorry if you're like, what did she just say? So those 3 have this weird triangle going on that's kind of a love triangle, but also more of like a companionship, deep relationship, because it's really uncertain if there was a romantic relationship between Indigo and Azure, because they were really close young girlhood friends. And that's also an element, the fact that we've got dual timelines going on, events that are happening in the present, so with the bridegroom as our narrator, and then things happening in the past with Azure being our main narrator. So it's really fascinating. I'm enjoying like the darkness of it. You can't really tell who's a monster, and if we're talking monsters metaphorically or monsters as in literally. The only thing right now, I'm about 100 pages in, it has slowed down, so it's starting to feel a bit more slow burn than the beginning half did. But something just happened, this strange reveal, this event that definitely has me wondering what's going on at the end of the last chapter I finished. So I'm hoping that things start to pick up again. But for now, it's reminding me of the Night Circus in regards to just beautiful, lush language with not a super lot of like action going on. So, but I do think that it's probably going to change once I get into the next few chapters. So we're going to have to see, and I'll let you know in my March wrap up what I think of it overall. Okay, so let's actually get into what I read in February. The first book that I read was on my physical TBR, and I actually ended up reading it along with an audiobook through Libby, and I think that because the audiobook was available, that's what helped me prioritize reading this book, because it has been on my shelf for quite a few years, and that is A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro. It's the first in the Charlotte Holmes series. This is a modernized reimagining of Sherlock Holmes. So it actually happens in modern day. The main characters are descendants from the well-known duo Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson. They're the great-great-great-grandchildren. I can't remember how many greats. It doesn't really matter. But Charlotte Holmes is obviously descended from Sherlock, and then we have James Holmes, who's descended from Dr. Watson. The author, Brittany Cavallaro, she clearly is very well versed in Sherlock Holmes, the various stories, whether they are the novels or the short stories. Predominantly in this book, though, it's the collection, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, that's featured. A lot of the stories are infused because the main overarching mystery is that there is a murder on this preparatory school campus where both of our two main characters are attending, and they are the prime suspects. And so they need to figure out who's framing them, why, and as they're investigating, they're realizing that there are certain clues that have been left at the crime scene and elsewhere that are trying to, like, implement them into the crime. Implement them? What is it? Implicate, I think, is the right word. So trying to implicate them into the crime. And all of these clues are homages to the stories that are in the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Basically, the whole idea is that Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson in this world were real, and Dr. Watson recorded the stories and still published them as it seems to happen. And so these stories were published. The cases are real, but some of them have been fabricated. Whatever. So that's what's going on here. And so if you're someone who likes Sherlock Holmes, who's read The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, then you're going to have a lot of fun, like getting to know what's going on, recognizing certain nods to the original stories. With that said, some of the changes were a bit odd for me. For instance, both of the main characters are still British, but for whatever reason, the preparatory school is based in the United States. I want to say it's in Connecticut, but I actually can't remember. Yeah, it's in Connecticut, which is really weird. I will say that Cavallaro is an American author, so maybe that's why she put it in an American setting. But there was a lot of like weird reasons for why Watson and Holmes were brought together in this book. There seemed to be some scheming on their relatives' parts because they'd never met each other until the beginning of the book. And that just felt a little bit forced to me. I felt like it was too convenient. Again, this is also, I never mentioned this, it is YA mystery, so that might be an element to keep in mind. Also, there are certain aspects that were inherited from Holmes and Watson. So Watson is like a journaler, obviously. He's a doctor by trade, but he was the one who was writing down all these stories. James Watson is our narrator, writing down the events of this mystery. And then we have Charlotte Holmes, who also has a drug dependency issue, which Sherlock Holmes was known for when it came to like opiates, like opium. This time around, I can't really remember what the actual drug was. The way that it's discussed is far more serious, which I do appreciate. Obviously, it was a bit more nonchalant in the 19th century when the original Sherlock Holmes stories were written by Arthur Conan Doyle. However, there is this one important content warning to also note that not only is substance abuse noted multiple times throughout this book, but there is a case of sexual assault. And so that happens to Charlotte Holmes. It happens prior to the book's beginning, but it is really important to note, mainly because this essay event occurs to her while she's under the influence, and she has been like used basically for this, like knowingly that she was under the influence, that she was not able to consent to what was about to happen. And the person who harmed her, who violated her, he is the one who's the victim in the story. And so, you know, you can always think like, oh, if we want to feel this way, oh, justice, you know, he's this horrible person. And there was really no way to like come forward and have him charged with what he did to her. That's what it seemed to me. The only problem that I had was just the way it was discussed. There didn't seem to be a lot of sensitivity to it. This was published in 2016. I feel like that sounds like a recent year, but in reality, 7 years have passed, and every year we get a bit more progressive, a bit more knowledgeable and self-aware when it comes to like what happens to the victim, what happens to the assaulter, and how, like, what language we use for it. And so toward the end of the book, there is this one line that just like really frustrated me, and it was by James Watson. It's in his thoughts, but he basically says that after all has happened, the person who died, who was murdered, he wishes that he could have grown up so that he could have like had a longer life to become a better person. And I don't know, like, not that I'm saying that the man deserved to die because of what he did to Sherlock Holmes. I just don't think that, like, having sympathy for this character saying, oh, I wish he could have grown up to have become a better person. No, I wish he would have continued to live so that justice could be served properly and Charlotte Holmes could have been like received the justice she deserved as a victim of SA. So that was the main issue that I had with this book, among others. And there was also this weird beginning section where James Watson was suffering from some type of like anger issues where he like could become violent, and I feel like that was just used as a ploy so he could get in a fight with the ultimate murder victim, so then again they would be assumed as the original culprits and everything. But then it was never mentioned again, and I was like, okay, why did we have to include this very odd, uncomfortable tendency of his towards like not being able to control himself? So I don't know. Anyway, so for this, I ended up giving it 2 stars just because, especially with the SA situation, it really made me uncomfortable, and I was really disappointed that the author decided to treat it that way. I do attribute it to it being about 7 years old at this point. I probably won't continue with the series. I think there are 4 books in this series, and I will probably be giving this book away now that I've discussed it. But yeah, I would be really interested to see if any of you have read this book and what you thought of it. If it had been a while ago, had you not really considered what was going on with the issues of substance abuse and SA or whatever was going on with it. So yeah, let me know, because this is one that I'll be thinking about for a while, but I didn't really like it. I wasn't really happy with it. The second book that I ended up reading in February was The Spokes of Venus. This is a poetry collection by Rebecca Morgan-Frank. I actually read it for a class that I'm taking. I'm taking a poetry class this semester, which I'm actually really loving. And I think that one aspect that I really appreciate having read it in an academic setting is that I got a lot of background information about the author. If you think about it, when we're picking up these books, how often do we actually look into who the author is, learning aspects about their life, their experiences, how they grew up, and how that influenced their writing? We don't usually do that. So the fact that I was reading this in an academic setting and my professor gave me that background knowledge, as I was reading the poems, I could see Morgan Frank throughout, like seeing how she was a dancer by trade. So then there's all these dance references and references to just a lot of self-awareness of the body throughout this. So it was really fascinating. There was a lot of concrete but also abstract language being used. There are some poems that I just really appreciated and just found really fascinating. And yeah, I am not someone who reads poetry very often, but I did appreciate it. I think I liked the first half of the collection more than the second. So I did end up just giving it 3 stars, but that's also because I just don't really understand poetry as much, and that's why I'm taking this class, so I can learn a bit more about it. But yeah, so this was a really fascinating thing, and I don't have too many thoughts about it other than I feel like I should look into the author more often, and maybe I will thanks to this experience. The third book that I read for February was actually a book that I borrowed through, I think it was Libby, because I ended up being able to read it. No, I didn't. So I actually borrowed it through Hoopla. So the first 2 books I mentioned were both on my physical TBR, which is great. And then Death on the Cherwell by Mavis Dorial Hay. That was a Golden Age detective fiction book that I had to borrow from Hoopla as an ebook. This book is actually the She Done It Book Club's pick for March. So if you're interested in joining, then you definitely have time to join in and read that book since it's the beginning of March now. And I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed this novel. This is the first experience that I had with Mavis Dorial Hay. She has written 3 books during her lifetime that fit in the mystery genre, and I'm actually really upset that she hadn't written more. For Death on the Cherwell, that was her second book, and we see some recurring characters from the first book, which I love, and it makes me want to read her first book. And so for this, though, the setting is my favorite aspect. It's set in an all-women's college, It's a fictional college in Oxford called Persephone College, and this is actually a great point about learning more about the author beforehand, because we're reading it for Shedunnit and I work for Shedunnit oftentimes in like a research role. I had to research the title, research the author as I was reading, and I learned so much about Hay that I ended up like learning that a lot of these aspects in the book were based on her own experience attending an all-women's college in Oxford as well. So it was really fascinating. It's a great setting. I think the college setting is also not a common setting in general across genres. I think it's because it's an odd experience. People experience college so differently as well. It's a weird time in our lives, typically between the ages of like 18 and 22. So I just don't think authors usually take the chance very often to write a college setting, but this was lovely. So what happened was there was a body found floating down the river in a boat, and it's the bursar of Persephone College. This group of 4 girls who end up kind of participating as their own Scooby gang of investigators bring the boat in, discover the body. The person ended up dying from drowning, but somehow, how did she get back in the boat then? And so this entire investigation ends up happening. There's also a men's college nearby, and these boys end up participating as well. And so it was a really great large group of characters, like a great cast. One of my favorite characters was actually Sally Watson. She's the leader of the Load League, this club that the 4 girls ended up creating, the 4 who ended up finding this body. And she is so tenacious. She's ready to go investigate. She's ready to face her fears and not admit defeat. And I really liked how cheeky her dialogue was as well. There's a lot of clever, humorous scenes in this entire book. And yeah, I just found it really fun, and I totally could see myself rereading it. I'm sad I don't own the book, so I intend to buy the book the next time I go to a bookstore and can find it. And yeah, I really loved it. The only thing that, for those who read mysteries predominantly for the solution, I found the solution to not be as strong as it could have been. Actually, speaking with the host of Shedunnit, she and I agreed that it seemed as though both of us, in our own way, we came up with different solutions that would have been a bit more complicated, and neither of those ended up being what happened. It was actually far more simple. With that said, neither of us were disappointed, because, I don't know, it depends on what kind of mystery reader you are, but I've said this on my channel before. I don't think the solution for the mystery genre is as important to my overall views and the overall quality of the book itself. The experience, the atmosphere, the characters can still make it such a great read. So for me, I ended up giving Death on the Cherwell 4 stars, and I truly, truly can see myself rereading that book in the future, because it was just so fun and I love the characters so much. Next, what did I read? I can't remember. Oh, I then ended up reading another library book, but this time it was a physical library book, and that was Lunar Love by Lauren Kung Jessen. I want to make sure that I have that name correctly, so I'm going to pull out my trusty bullet journal, because she definitely deserves recognition. Lauren Kung Jessen, yeah. So this was her debut novel, and I actually borrowed it on a chance. It was a few days leading up to Valentine's Day, and I realized I didn't really have a romance book planned, and so I ended up seeing that our library had just gotten it. I don't think our library did, but our library system did, and so I borrowed it, requested it during one of my shifts at the library, and it came in just in time. And so I read it over the weekend leading up to Valentine's Day, and it was just so lovely. It was a sweet romance. It's definitely perfect for those who like enemies to lovers in a contemporary romance scene as well. And the characters are diverse. Both the main character and her love interest are Chinese American. They're both mixed race, and the author herself is also mixed race. She dedicates the book to those who feel like they are juggling 2 different cultures, having one foot in one world and one foot in the other. And it was just lovely to see that representation. I loved how the fact that these 2 main characters are mixed race, half Chinese and half of some other type of European descent, they were able to come together and actually relate to each other in that sense. They bonded over that, and how they tried to juggle tradition with new age American kind of lifestyles. So it was really fascinating. And of course, there's a lot of like cute references because the whole premise is that both characters run their own matchmaking business. So our main character, Olivia, she actually has a more traditional business where it follows the Chinese zodiac. She had just taken over the business from her grandmother and aunt, and so she follows a very traditional lifestyle where it's physical matchmaking. And then our love interest, Bennett, he actually participates in an app, and so he utilizes loosely the Chinese zodiac on his app, and that's where these two characters collide in differences, and just a lot of mess ensues. But I felt like their chemistry was immediate. These characters completely blended so well together, they complemented each other, and it was really cute to see them kind of feeling each other out, deciding if they were enemies, friends, and then something more. And it was definitely a sweet romance. So if you're someone who wants a closed door or clean, non-spicy romances, then this is the book for you. And I'm talking more so in regards to physical contact. There was still a lot of romantic tension. There was a lot of heightened love interest elements going on, but in regards to physicality, there wasn't much in the book, so that's perfect if you like that kind of thing. I ended up giving the book 4 stars. I was leaning towards 5, but the only thing that I do attribute to myself is actually this third act breakup that happens. I'm very new to the romance world, and so talking to others who are very much better versed in this genre, they were saying that that is one element that a lot of romance readers struggle with, is this guarantee that there must be a third act breakup or blowout or something. And the way certain authors do it is great, and the way some others don't. And while I didn't necessarily view this as particularly bad on Lauren Kung Jessen's part, however, there was a, I don't know, maybe this is saying something more about myself, but I felt like I actually came up with better arguments for why these two characters might clash enough to the point where they decide to go their separate ways, and like for more realistic arguments, more realistic, rational disagreements that they had, or difficulties blending their two lives together. But the thing that Kung Jessen just ended up doing seemed a bit more dramatic, but again, that is totally par for the course for romance books. I think more often than not, the way she did it is the way all of them do it. I think that's also why I personally struggle to give all romance books 5 stars. I've only ever given 5 stars to 2 romance books in my life. One was the final book that I read in December 2022, and that was The Secret Bridesmaid. And then I actually finally gave my second 5-star review to another book that I'm about to feature on this video for February. So like, it's just rare for me to do that. And yeah, I think that was the one thing I struggled with, but it is very sweet. And there's a lot of bonding over those that they've lost as well. They bond over the fact that those that are dear to them, who help them cling to their, especially their Chinese heritage, how they kind of navigate when they lose someone like that. How do they stay close to their culture and to those people who have passed? So it was just a lovely book, and I did give it 4 stars. Highly recommend for anyone who loves really just like heartwarming romances. Speaking of that 5-star romance read that I read, I firstly have to thank Brooklyn from Brooklyn Reads, because the one time that I was on her own reading sprints, during that live stream, I was in between books, and so I asked her and those viewing what I should read next, and this was actually on Valentine's Day, my time, and they were in agreement that I should read this book, and it ended up being 5 stars, and that is Ink by Elizabeth Hunter. This is actually the first in what is a love story on 7th and Main romance series. There's 4 books in the series, 3 novels, 1 novella, and yeah, this is the first, and it is on my physical TBR. So again, feeling really good about February's rankings, or at least what I was doing in regards to like reading off of my physical shelf. So for Ink, oh my gosh, it is just so good. It was so great. So I really enjoy this cover. There is a second cover that is a bit steamier and like suggests that the spiciness is a bit high, and I'll show you here. And it was quite spicy compared to Lunar Love. This had far more explicit spicy scenes, so if you're into that, highly recommend it. It did remind me of Tessa Bailey. As I said, I haven't read too many romance novels, so I can't give too many comparisons, but it definitely reminded me of Tessa Bailey, specifically her, what is they called? The Bessinger sisters? Is that their last name? It Happened One Summer and Hook, Line, and Sinker, that series. That's what this reminded me of. And so we have two main characters. This is actually Emmy, and this is Ox. Emmy is a big bookworm. She ends up inheriting her grandmother's bookshop in this small town that she used to grow up in that's become really progressive and has like really expanded. And so rather than selling it, she decides to open it. But there's this huge open space in the bookstore that she just isn't using. And in comes Ox. He is this tattoo artist who recently loses his job. And so she ends up inviting him to open up right next door through this like opening, that he should open his own tattoo shop. And so they do, and they end up calling the shop Ink, which I just love. And the tension between these two characters is just great. I really love how they actually realize that they're really similar, and what's amazing and adds to the tension is that they agree that because they're going to be business partners, there can't be any romance that goes on. And of course it's actually Ox that says it, and he's the one who immediately regrets doing that, and he starts pushing the envelope, feeling like he should never have made this rule. And so it's really amazing, and it's really cute. And I felt like in this one particularly, there is a third act breakup as well, but it just felt more realistic. It didn't feel as dramatic as well. And I feel like the two characters handled themselves in a way that would have been like mature adults who are dealing with this, wanting to make a relationship work. Like they heard each other out. And I think it made more sense, even though there were some aspects that were a bit dramatic. I felt like the dialogue between them was realistic, and I appreciated it. So yeah, I love these two characters. I can't wait to read the second book in the series, and I believe that one is called Hooked, and it actually features two characters, like side characters, that are in this, so you get a little bit of a taste before you go into book 2. And oh my gosh, I can't wait to get it, because I really did love this one so much. And this one had been on my shelf for some time as well, about a year or so. So yeah, if you're interested in this, I highly recommend it, because it was great. I've already like promised one person that I'm gonna let her borrow it because of how much I liked it. So yeah, 5 stars, spicy contemporary romance, tattoos. It made me want to get a tattoo. So there we are. Okay, we are 2 books away from finishing this video, so thanks for staying with me if you are here. We are now turning into a bit of a very different 180. Instead of romance, I'm going to be talking about a horror thriller. I think it's probably just deemed more of a thriller, and that is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This is another book that has been on my shelf for years. I was a member of Book of the Month a long time ago, and this says that it was a part of June 2020, and I guess I must have been a member in June 2020, so that's kind of crazy to think about, but anyway. And so I've been meaning to read this, and Riley Sager is actually a really well-known author. A lot of people are huge fans of him, and I had never read anything by him, so I thought, why not? Let's just get into it. And this actually helped me again thanks to Libby, because I got the audiobook on Libby, and that actually got me going on some of these. So I think that's become a really good strategy for me, that books that I've been like, oh, I've been meaning to read this, if the audiobook becomes available, then that makes me a bit more motivated. And I mostly listened, but I periodically went through the book as well to read along with it. So it was kind of a two-edged sword. That's not the right term to use. It doesn't matter. We're gonna move on. So for Home Before Dark, this is fascinating because we've got a dual timeline. We have our main character, whose name is Maggie. Maggie in the present. She inherits this house that has kind of ruined her life, or really made her life a struggle, because 25 years earlier, she had been 5 years old, just moved to this house with her parents, and these suspicious events happened to the point where the family ran out maybe like 3 weeks after moving in. And then her father subsequently wrote a book called House of Horrors that just made them famous, made the house famous, to suggest that there is basically, this house remembers the horrific things that have happened, and multiple horrific things have happened in this property. And so he writes this book, and basically the book follows Maggie her entire life. And so when her father ends up passing away, she realizes that he never actually sold the house, and now she owns it. And so she ends up deciding to move there mainly just to be living there to investigate and see what actually happened in that house, because she's been struggling to know if it was true or not. She feels adamant that it isn't, so she just wants to get answers. And so when she moves there, she decides that she's going to renovate the home and try to resell it, because that's actually what her current job is to renovate homes and then resell them. Oh my gosh. Okay, sorry, I just got a notification that I'm really low on battery and I'm so nervous. It's fine, go. Okay, so meanwhile, as she's going through these events present day, we actually get flashbacks to her father, and I feel like I can't remember if it's actually like excerpts from the book or if it's just him speaking from his own narrative style. I think it is excerpts from the book. Anyway, so for like 25 years earlier, so we get events of the house while he's there, while the family's moving in, and then we're seeing her kind of puzzling the pieces together. And as the book progresses, we become more and more certain that these events are actually true, that something is wrong in the house, that the house is remembering these horrific events, things are repeating, and basically we're thinking Maggie's not safe in this home. Like, with every passing day that she's staying there, history seems to be repeating itself and she's just not safe. And so I loved the creepy atmosphere. I loved the back and forth between dual timelines. Something would happen in the past and then Maggie would come across it in the present and we would know what it's linked to, and you would just think, oh my god, is she gonna figure this out? This is so scary. And her 5-year-old self was very creepy. It was like I really enjoyed that whole aspect, because the other thing is that her parents throughout her life have always said, that house is not safe for you. You are not safe if you go back, like specifically her. So it was really well written. The only thing that really frustrated me were like two things. One thing I felt like I could totally be fine with and just ignore was that there's this weird aspect where Maggie has this one person that she's kind of confiding in that she met while she was there, and she gets angry because she discovers that he has like a record, that he had been to prison at one point. And while I understand the fact that that would make her uncomfortable, that maybe she wouldn't feel like she trusted him as much, the fact that she calls him a liar because he didn't tell her this, when in reality they've only known each other for 2 weeks, and those who are reformed or those who have then left prison, they are under no obligation to tell you, a stranger, what they've done. Like, I feel like that's a bit discriminatory to expect them to divulge that type of information to a stranger after you've given your name. And so she then goes and calls him a liar. She says, you're just like my dad. I don't need any more liars in my life. And I was like, okay, Maggie, whatever, fine. Like, you go off and be alone. Like, obviously that was more of a device to get her isolated, but it was just annoying and like stupid. That's just my thought on it. And then the ending was really the last straw. I was really frustrated at that because I was so eager and excited about what was going to happen that I was really disappointed by the ending. Firstly, every human, ghost, and other being at one point or another was blamed for all of the events that happened. We were provided thorough explanations for why this one result is the result, why that's the solution. I accepted it, and then a page later we were corrected with a brand new one and the cycle continued. And then the final solution that was given, I felt like was the most disappointing one. It was the least satisfactory one. I was frustrated because I wanted to really get into this like spooky atmosphere, and it just fell flat in the end. So I ended up giving it 2 stars, which is disappointing. With that said, I could totally see myself trying another Riley Sager book again because I did love the building up to it, but just probably not anytime soon because that was a really big letdown. And as opposed to mysteries, I think thrillers, horror, those types of genres are very much dependent like on overall satisfaction, how the ending is written. So that's how I felt. I'd love to see what you all think, because this was one that I was like, oh, this is gonna be a bit controversial, but I was not a fan of the ending. Oh, okay, finally I ended up reading Cheddar Late Than Dead. It is part of the Grilled Cheese Mysteries written by Linda Riley. This was a Neck Alley e-arc that I received, so thank you to the publisher. So this book I ended up giving 3 stars, mainly because it was okay mystery, it was cozy. The one aspect that I actually really hated about it was, one, I was more disappointed than hated, but there was an opportunity for this author to provide this really lovely sapphic relationship between 2 of the women characters. Just the way that they cared about each other, the way it was, written, I was like, these 2 women totally, who are a bit older, totally could be in this lovely gay relationship together. And I just felt like that was a missed opportunity because of how heteronormative everyone else was, which tends to be the case in cozy mysteries because that's what genre this is in. And then there was also the ending where just, again, one of the women characters who I thought would be great in a gay relationship ends up being like written as this woman who is kind of mentally unstable, mainly because of her life as an unmarried, childless woman who's jealous of her sister who does end up having a daughter who did get married. As someone who, from my own perspective, who's child-free, who's not married, who with every passing year enjoys the idea of being child-free, I felt it was really annoying that that type of stereotype was pushed upon readers. Like, at this point, it's so archaic. It's really annoying. It kind of reminds me of, for instance, like Miss Marple. She is this independent, unmarried, child-free woman, whether it was by choice or not, and she's still the successful inspector detective, and there are many others throughout history that exist, you know, who made these amazing feats, who are these amazing women. And some of them did choose to be independent because a lot of times single women are statistically shown to actually be happier. They are among the happiest groups of people in society, but that is a discussion for another day. So I just was really frustrated that this author decided to really suggest that if you are an older woman who does not have a man in her life and who doesn't have children, you are like pretty much going to be lonely and jealous and just a horrible, like, I don't know, I just have a horrible life, and that really, really annoyed me. And so I was actually close to giving it 2 stars, but I ended up giving it 3 because it's fine, whatever. And it was like a sweet mystery. It's just that one element really kind of pissed me off, if we're going to be honest. But yeah, so those are my February reads. I think I ended up reading, let's see here, Home Before Dark, Spokes of Venus, Ink, and Study in Charlotte. 4 books were on my physical TBR this month, so more than half. That's lovely. I will 100% take that. And yeah, I think the average ended up being like a 3.3 star rating overall for the month, which, you know, that is okay. That means I had a pretty solid month of reading, had some highs, had some lows. That's okay with me. If you are here and you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, don't forget to comment and let me know what you thought and what books you've read in February. And also consider subscribing, ring that bell so that you're one of the first to be notified the next time another video like this pops up. I really do appreciate every time someone clicks on my video and watches it, so thank you so much. And I really do hope that you stick around, and I see you next time. Okay, bye everybody.